right, we are back with our guest for the week. He is an author and a pornography addiction expert, Joshua Shea. Did I
You
pronounce
did.
that right?
Congratulations.
Yes.
I'm
How's it
doing quite
going?
well. How are you?
Pretty good. Are you
I
in
am
Maine?
in Maine. I am in. It's actually a
Nice.
nice day still today. We're kind of waiting for that death of autumn to appear very soon. And even though I'm 44 years old, I've been out of high school for, geez, 25, 26 years. It's still this time of year
Yeah.
when the air starts to change a little and become a little more autumn that I still feel it in my gut, like, oh my God, school's about to start. And despite the fact I
Yeah.
haven't been there for more than half my life, I still get that internal feeling of, oh, I got to go back to school. And thankfully, it's also, oh wait, no, I don't. And my kids are
Yeah.
going off, but and it's nice to drop them off and drive away from the place. But yeah, this time in Maine, there's this big shift in how the wind goes and how
Mm.
everything feels. And I just so equate that to going back to school, and that's not a fun feeling.
I've never.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. And my grandpa lived in Maine for the longest time. I never went there, but and I don't know what city he lived in, but he lived there for the longest time, so that's kind of the only relation I have to Maine. But yeah, I definitely relate to that as well. It's like first week of September. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, here
yeah.
we go.
We get
Yeah.
about 12 great weeks a year. And then we probably get
Mm,
2 or 3 good ones on the other side, and we're now into that last stretch of
mm.
good weeks. And
Yeah.
it kind of sucks because you're just like, well, I know it's going to suck for 35 weeks after this.
Oh God.
Yeah,
Yes. Um, so I guess we can just dive right
let's do it.
in. Um, so we got it. So it's probably a good idea. We might as well just start off talking about OnlyFans,
Sure.
and if that's fine. And I'm certainly very well versed about OnlyFans and everything
Okay,
that
I can read
that
between those lines.
yeah that it is offered at that site. And
Let me ask you, when
as
did you
I
join?
yeah, probably 2 years
Wow, so you're one
ago.
of the early ones. Okay,
Yeah.
congrats.
Yes. So, yeah, as I was thinking about sort of talking to you today, I was thinking about OnlyFans, and I was thinking about cam girls
Yeah.
camming. And we had a talk on here a long time ago because I found out about cam girls in like 2014 when a director that I like named Sean Dunn released a documentary called Cam Girls, and I watched that and I was like, what the hell is going on here? And then I had to go search for that, and I feel like all I'm saying is that sort of felt like a stepping stone to OnlyFans almost. It's like someone producing their own content
Well,
that's
it's
not
it's do it
attached,
yourself
you
porn.
know.
I mean,
Right.
in a nutshell, and I think that there is a perception, or and probably even a reality between the professional cam girl and the
Mm,
OnlyFans girl. It's kind of like somebody,
mm,
a cam girl is almost like a salaried employee, and a OnlyFans girl is a part-time worker.
right.
In that kind of parlance, and I think you're absolutely right. I think that the cam world um, did
Yeah.
absolutely introduce this. And what's interesting is if you look at the history of cams, you go back very early on. A company called Stickum was probably the first one that brought this kind of camming to the forefront. And there were a few other of these very small, very choppy cameras going back as early as 2008, 2009. And,
Mm,
ever since you could put something on paper or put it on film, there's always been pornography. And it didn't take
right.
people, whether it was the performer on one side or the lecherous person on the other side who wanted to see something,
Right.
that it came together. So I think what happened was you saw a lot of these larger companies, the MyFreeCams, the Chatterbaits, see what could be done with something like Stickum or some of these other earlier things, like, or a chat roulette, one of these kind of things, and see that,
Yeah.
gee, there's really a way to monetize this here. And And what
Oh
you had
yeah.
happen was after the cam stuff kind of got its fingers into the world of economics, you started to see other people try to figure out how to monetize new ways of doing porn. And OnlyFans, from a business point of view, it's a brilliant
Yeah.
model, because I think much like Snapchat, it's going to carry on. Snapchat
Yeah.
exists specifically for sexting, um, but it took over
Yeah.
so many other parts of society. If you look at the platform for OnlyFans, it would be perfect for indie musicians, perfect for artists, perfect for. I mean, when people ask me what is OnlyFans, I say it's almost like a combination of Facebook and Etsy that's X-rated.
Mm.
Because you can sell
Yeah.
stuff through there, and I think that the cam world was a little too serious for a lot of the people out there. But when you brought OnlyFans to the forefront and truly created do it at home porn, if you don't want to be a cam girl, you can just put photos out there. If you don't want to take all your
Yeah.
clothes off, you can do bikini and lingerie stuff. It gave so much
Yeah.
control to the user that I think a lot of those people who perhaps were on the fence about entering that world, it made it so much more user friendly, so much in their eyes safer, that it was something to go on. And it created the, for me, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, be wrong, but it created the last genre of porn, and it created the genre of porn that so many of us always wondered about, and that is pornography of people we know. And
Right.
that's a huge
Yes,
thing.
because
Pornography of people we
yeah.
know. How many of us picked up
Yeah.
a Playboy magazine when we were younger, or what would it be like if I was turned on a porn and saw somebody I knew? And now,
Yeah.
well, I think that most OnlyFans girls start with people they know and then branch out.
Yeah, definitely. And I even have that written down because I just imagine, 30, 40 years ago that's like that would be like the ultimate fantasy or whatever of you. I mean, this is what happened 30, 40 years ago. You go renting a movie, popping it in. Oh my God, I know that person. That probably almost never.
Right.
That probably happened like
Well,
four times in the history of the world. But now, Eric, you might not know. Now that's like super common. I mean, someone you went to high school with is on OnlyFans, like 100%
oh,
guarantee.
absolutely. If you talk to
Yeah.
anybody under 30 years old and you ask them, "Do you know somebody on OnlyFans?" and they said no, it's only because they don't know the
Yeah.
person is doing it. It's amazing when I
Exactly.
go on shows like this or do other interviews, or even just talk to people about this. There is this cutoff point at about 33 years old where everybody over 33 has never heard of OnlyFans, and everybody
Yeah.
under 33, it's just part of the culture. And it's amazing that
Yeah.
there's this line of demarcation there that is so strong. And talking about your point of wanting to see somebody, I mentioned in a article I
Yeah.
just wrote for my website, talking about a friend of mine in college back in, this must have been 97 or so. He found out that a girl he went to high school was going to be in one of the Playboy college girl editions, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I remember he ran to the store when it came out. And I remember him coming back. He lived across the hall from me. I remember him coming back, and he had the most dejected look on his face. And I was like, "Eric, what's the deal?" And he's like, "Well, she's in there, but it isn't what I hoped." And he showed me it, and it's her
Oh.
and a couple bikini-clad friends, like playing frisbee in front of their dorm or something. And she wasn't
Oh.
naked, and he was absolutely
Yeah.
crushed. And all I could think is that I wonder, wherever he is now, I just wonder if he is like, this is what I've been waiting for. Uh, because it's
Right.
exactly that genre that's never been touched before. And for something new to come to the world of pornography, for some new genre to show up when you've got all of these people out of
Hmm.
work, both users and new producers, it's the perfect storm. I mean, if it was a publicly traded company, I wouldn't buy any because of my
Yeah.
stance on pornography. But from a
Right.
business point of view, boy, you couldn't line things up better than these people did.
Well, and just a few days ago, there was this girl that I follow on Snapchat, and she, for the last few weeks or months, she's always said, "Oh, I might make an OnlyFans soon," whatever, over and over, just teasing it. Like 4 days ago, she did make one, and she set the price at $30 a month. And within 24 hours, it shows how many people have signed up. And within 24 hours, 216
Yeah.
people had signed up. So if you do the math, she made like 7 grand in a day. It's
The
crazy.
average new person who signs up makes 3,000 in their first month. So she was clearly marketing herself well.
Oh my god.
But think about that. If
Yeah.
you're a bartender or a waiter or a waitress, and you've been screwed
Yeah.
around the last 6 7 months at work because of COVID, you're now not still getting your full shifts. Why are you going to bust your butt 8 9 hours to
Right.
make a lower minimum wage than the regular one, hope that your tips are good enough, and they're still probably not. Most of these people don't qualify for full unemployment benefits. So what are your
Right.
options? Well, if you're a good-looking 22-year-old, it kind of makes sense that you would go in this direction, especially since the trauma, or not trauma, but the stigma behind pornography and
Mhm.
behind nudity doesn't exist for this generation that's under 30 who was raised on the internet. We could talk about whether that's good or bad, healthy or not, and all that, but the fact is this stigma
Mhm.
doesn't exist for these people. So doing something like going online and being naked is not a big deal to them the way it would have been to my generation. Or, look, I remember my grandmother once
Right.
telling me a story about how she wore a two-piece bathing suit to some event in 1955, and she showed this much
Yeah.
skin on her stomach, and it was the biggest scandal
Yeah.
you'd ever think of. And now, people are passing around naked pictures in high school of each other. um, how much
Oh
things have
yeah.
changed in only 50, 60 years, and how stigmas have dropped,
Yeah.
and we haven't evolved our brains, and we haven't evolved who we are that fast. So you're seeing a lot of uh, problems, a lot of issues pop up, especially in the younger generation, when it comes to pornography, when it comes to pornography addiction, because we don't evolve as fast as the culture does.
What's your what's your
Right.
stance on, do you
Yeah.
think it's across the board, like not a good thing to be looking at pornography, or do you think there's a healthy
Well,
medium there?
well, no, I've got a couple different thoughts from a scientific point of view, and I got to push this first. I am not anti-pornography at all. If you, it's a legal thing. If you're over 18 and you want to view it, totally up to you. Just like smoking, just like drinking at 21. I know that pornography is never going to be
Mm.
gone. You go and look at cave paintings from
Mhm.
ancient Phoenicia. You look at any of the pottery from Egyptians
No.
and other societies that are 5,000, 8,000 years old in museums. You're going to see pornography. It's on the cave walls. It's on the pottery. We're never going to not have pornography, and I think that. More than talking about pornography being good or bad, it's a matter of, is your sexuality healthy or unhealthy? Um, with pornography,
Mhm.
I can point to dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of studies that I actually have read because I'm a geek who likes to read studies. I can point to them how pornography is negative. I've never had anybody hand me a study that says pornography is a positive thing in any way. If you can find something
Mhm.
positive about it, let me know. I want to be the first to find out. Um, and ultimately, I do believe that people can view pornography and have it not turn into a problem, because people can drink and have it not turn into a
Right.
problem.
Hmm.
People can gamble and have it not turn into a problem. So, from a scientific point of view, I absolutely believe that pornography can not be a problem for some people. However, and I used to at this point share a million and one stats about how it was bad. The last presentation that I did before COVID struck us down back in December of 2019, I was invited to a health center at a college here in New England. and I was invited to speak to a small group of probably 12, 15 women who were all, 18 to 22, and two or three people who worked in the health center or faculty members who were there. And I was given the typical stats. We were having a good conversation. And then one of the most fascinating things I've heard in the last year came out where one woman who was there, probably 19 or 20, she said that she did not like to have sex with virgin men. And uniformly around the room, all of these women were like, "Oh yeah, 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 yeah." And I was like, "Wait, this is something I've not heard. Why don't you, young women? Why do you not want to have
Mm.
sex with virgin men?" And they said because virgin men have grown up on pornography. It's just the norm for them. And even the most vanilla mainstream porn these days is very
Yeah.
anti-woman if you really break it down. The man is very aggressive. The man is almost always on top. The man is holding, her by the neck. The man is saying negative things. When it comes time to
Yeah.
finish, it's not a sweet loving thing. It's usually something very degrading when the guy
Right.
finishes. And that, even despite the fact that most young people are not porn addicts, this is what they're growing up as the norm. This isn't extreme pornography. This is mainstream pornography, and this is the message that they're getting. The boys, the young men, are getting messages that this is how sex is, and it's just reinforced and
Right.
reinforced because it's part of the norm. It's part of average pornography. So when they get with a young woman for the first time, they take their cues from what they've watched. And these young women were like, we don't want to be with these kinds of guys because this isn't what sex is. This isn't what we want. They're viewing some kind of fantasy. They're viewing this as a norm, and it's not the norm. This is not the way we want things to be. It turns out far fewer people have three ways, far fewer people have anal sex, far
Yeah.
fewer people have these,
Yeah.
crazy scenarios that you see in porn, but it's such a normal part of porn that these young men normalize it, and these young women don't want to have to retrain them. In talking to them further, they did retrain some guys. They
Hmm.
do have to speak up, but it completely kills the mood. It completely kills the scenario. Do you really want to look up at someone and say you're doing it wrong? And so ultimately
Hmm.
these young women avoid having sex with virgin men because they don't want to have to deal with the situation in these guys' minds that grew out of pornography. And to me, that's probably the best illustration of why pornography isn't good, or what, or a negative
Right.
that comes out of pornography that is just across the board. Forget
Yeah.
addiction, forget anything like that. It's just across the board. To have this many women feel this way, I've got to feel like it's something that's nationwide or maybe even international. I think it's probably why you see
Right.
these red pill and incel and other kinds of movements out there that are almost anti-woman. And that's what pornography brought to us. So, is pornography negative? Well, this is not a positive thing, and this is what it's doing to our youngest group of adults. So, draw your own conclusion.
Do you think so?
Well, yeah.
I've
Yeah.
I've definitely had this thought before with young men. I play a lot of video games. I'm friends with a lot of 18-year-old guys, and we've had this conversation before, and it's weird. It's weird for me. I slipped in right before this was an issue. You know what I mean? I came.
Yeah.
No one had phones really when I was in high school. It was just starting to hit.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it was
same
like I
with me.
kind of missed the train. I was still all,
Right.
yeah, when I was a kid, you had to get a magazine. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or you were lucky if you got a VHS tape or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right at the end of my
Yeah.
high school, got a DVD. Um, do you think, and I believe that thoroughly, I believe guys, you're young, you don't understand what it is, and
It's
then,
sex ed. I mean, porn is
but
sex
yeah,
ed.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Do you think women, are young women watching porn? You know what I mean? Are
They
they
are
being
more.
influenced?
They are more than ever before. Absolutely, because you got to take a look at the pornography industry, and you go back to the '70s and even the '80s. You didn't have all this make it
Hmm.
yourself at home amateur stuff. It was done by professional studios, and
Hmm.
especially before VHS, there was a limited number of places that you could have a movie put. You know, it had to be an adult theater or a drive-in theater, or you found it on a reel-to-reel movie if you had one of those, if you were, you know, a major porn aficionado. And it cost so much money back then to not only make pornography, but also to distribute it. So turning a profit on pornography was very difficult back then. So they targeted only the audience they knew would buy, the straight white males. But as time has changed, as the VCR came into existence, as DVD players, as the internet got here, porn got cheaper and cheaper to produce, and porn got cheaper and cheaper to distribute. I mean, the three of us, we could have a porn made today and up on Pornhub and some other places making us money by the end of the day. That was never possible before. So since it's so much less expensive, you now have the ability to super hyper target your market. If you look at the biggest growth in pornography addiction cases, you're going to find it's white women, you're going to find it's black men, and you're going to find it's members of the Catholic and the LDS churches. Now, why is this? Because porn is being targeted towards them now, but it's also so much easier to get. You were not going to have a woman go into a theater that was full of a bunch of guys masturbating back in 1984. It wasn't safe. You were not going to be, you know, a high-ranking member of your church and dare to be caught dead going into an adult bookstore by somebody driving by on the street. But now you don't have any of those issues. You can access whatever you want from the comfort of your own home. And if you want to see, you know, an Asian girl, a Mexican guy, a white midget, and somebody dressed like a leprechaun throwing fish sticks while all these people have sex, you can do that now because it's so hyper targeted. And that's the thing, is that people aren't realizing is that at the end of the day, it's not the straight white guy who has the license to have a sex drive. Women do, black people do, Asian people do, tall people do, short people do. Every person does, even if you're super religious, even if you are, you know, homosexual, pansexual, whatever it may be. Everybody on earth is wired this way. That's why a lot of times it's important to talk about healthy sexuality versus unhealthy sexuality and how those differ from person to person. Ultimately, though, yeah, everybody is now being affected by pornography. The number of women are still lower than men, but it is growing. It is growing fast.
Yeah.
And right now, the 18 to 30-year-old group, the last thing I saw was that you're looking at about an 18 to 20% rate of those who self-identify as having a problem with pornography, watching too much pornography, or actually having an addiction. So almost 1 out of 5 women who are 18 to 30 have some issues with pornography. With men, it's 1 out of 3, but nobody talks about these crazy statistics because then you have to talk about pornography. And I think that a lot of people are simply afraid to say the word because they fear if they say pornography out loud, it's all of a sudden they put a rubber stamp of approval. It means that they view it. It means that they love it. And simply saying the word out loud doesn't mean any of those things.
The other, I've always in my mind, like, especially talking with young guys on video games, it's, you know, that side is, I feel bad that they're growing up in this environment that it seems super unhealthy. But then, crap, I totally lost. I'm sorry. I got to apologize right off the bat.
Okay.
I'm sick as shit right now. I've had a fever all night last night, so I'm like, my brain is just mush. And I just totally lost where I was going with that, so I'm sorry. Yeah, Brad, you're gonna pick me up here.
Yeah, so I mean, with all these trends happening over time, I mean, the biggest trend of the past 2 decades or 1 decade has to be that you're just getting it younger and younger. And it's like, I'm wondering almost what should parents sort of think about this, because I mean, the parents are over 33, so they're completely detached. And I feel like it might be an obvious idea of, hey, when I give my kid a smartphone, they're going to have access to porn. But what I was thinking today is, it's not your kid. It's like when one kid in the classroom gets access to the smartphone, then everyone's going to see it. So I would
That's
just
exactly it. I
assume,
try to tell,
you know.
when I speak to parents, I try, and they're like, "Well, we have filters on Junior's phone, and Junior's iPad can't access this stuff." And
Right.
it's like, well, that's great that you've locked down 2 devices. There's only 6.8 billion more in the world, and that's the thing, is that's
Yeah.
why I push that this is a matter of education for parents, and I also push that. Parents need to recognize
Mm.
that this is probably not the same talk as the sex talk. The This is more a talk
Mm-hmm.
similar to stay away from drugs or alcohol, or stay away from cigarettes. Learn how to cross the street correctly. This is a matter of safety, and I guess you could say even health safety. I think that parents need to, and I'm sorry that in 2020 we have to talk about pornography, but hey, we don't have to talk about polio anymore. So there are trade-offs over time. And what we need to do
Yeah.
is recognize that you can make this very, very age appropriate. Kids want direction. Kids want to know right from wrong. And you don't have to even use the word pornography. You can tell a 6-year-old kid that you don't ever let anybody look at what's under your bathing suit. You don't look at what's under anybody else's bathing suit, and you don't let anybody take any pictures of you there, and you don't take pictures of other people. And if anybody shows you pictures, just come let me know. Much like you said, if you see a cigarette that's
Mm-hmm.
lit sitting there, come tell mommy or daddy. Don't put it in your mouth. And then you let it go. I mean, you let it
Mm-hmm.
go at that. Simple enough. And as they get older, you can tell them more and more. I mean, I truly believe that if we would sit with our 13 and 14-year-old boys, or it probably should be even younger than that at this point, if we could sit with them
Yeah.
and tell them about porn-induced erectile dysfunction, which is completely going under the radar but is huge these days. If we could tell them about this, that we probably would have a huge dent in the numbers, because porn-induced erectile dysfunction is, if you've watched too much porn and it's having some kind of effect on your life. Now, for a lot of guys, it's not that it just completely kills their ability to have an erection or kills their ability to have sex. There's usually some weird little porn aspect to it. Now, if you go to my website, I do offer a coaching advisement piece for both addicts and their family members. I had a guy last year, he was 22 years old, really cool guy, and he reached out to me and he said, I need to figure out how to have sex with my girlfriend. I was like, well, I've never had this as somebody talking to me. So I said, well, what's the problem? And he said that I think I have PIED, and because the only time that I can finish with my girlfriend is if porn is playing in the room. And that's just fascinating to me. It's like, yeah, that's the only way I can finish. And I talked to his girlfriend as well. Really cute, funny, smart 20-year-old girl, the kind of girl that you hope you end up with, but the kind of girl that you probably use if you can't perform as a normal person into adulthood. And talked to both of them, and they on their own came up with the quasi solution where they had an apartment together. She would be in their living room, he would be in their bedroom. He would be on his desktop computer, she would be on her phone, and they would sext back and forth with each other, because something in his mind told him when he was viewing it on a computer screen that it was pornography. So when they got to the
Yeah.
point that he was about ready to go, she would run in from the other room, and they would have sex like
Oh
normal
God.
people. And
That's
they,
Yeah.
bananas.
yeah, absolutely, it's crazy. But the thing
Yeah.
is, they don't want to tell this story publicly.
Yeah.
And there aren't many people telling this
Right.
story publicly, but I think that you tell this story to 13 and 14-year-old boys, it's going to resonate, because 13 and 14-year-old boys, even if they're looking at porn regularly, they want a girlfriend. They don't want to end up as a porn addict. They want a girlfriend. They can't wait till they're 15,
Right.
16, 17, and maybe you're having, actual sex with girls. That's what they want. They don't want to be porn addicts.
Right.
So if at 13 and 14, we can tell them stories, and real stories, about how there are men now in their early 20s who weren't careful with their porn use, and now basically their penises are broken. that's going to scare the hell out of a
Right.
13 or 14-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And I think that it's okay when it comes to public health, when it comes to your long-term happiness, when it comes to your ability to couple in a healthy way. I think it's okay to share some kind of really extreme stories with these guys. And I think that something like this, even if you can knock down the percentage of young male porn addicts by 2 or 3% telling these stories, you are literally talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions
Right.
of people. So we need to start being more proactive to this. We need to start having some kind of strategies. And while I feel horrible for this 18 to 30-year-old group who just got to, attack the internet without any parental, supervision, we need to start teaching these kids when they're on their own to treat pornography responsibly. And yeah, when you're 18 years old, if you want to look at pornography, go to town. When you're 18 years old, if you want to smoke, go to town. I've let you know as your parent what the health risks are. I'm sure you're going to experiment, because everybody does, of
Yeah.
looking at it or trying it. I mean, how many people in this world have tried smoking and didn't end up as smokers? How many people have tried an illegal drug and didn't end up a drug addict? There are plenty of people who try pornography
Yeah.
and don't end up addicts. We know there's going to be a level of experimentation, but none of us have ever, under probably 50 years old, have ever tried a cigarette and not know how dangerous it is, not know
Yeah.
what can
Hmm.
happen through it. So if we just have this educational component, I think a lot of these issues will take care of themselves. You look at like teen smoking rates, they're lower than they've ever been because we've been pounding it through PSAs for the last 40, 50 years. The
Yeah.
percentage of our grandparents who smoked versus our parents who smoked versus, my age who smokes versus, my kids who are in their late teens, they smoke, it keeps dropping. And it's one of those things where I believe that, you know, if we can do this with pornography, if we can do this with, some of the other ills of the world, education does lead to the solution to most of our
Yeah.
problems.
What I was getting at before, sorry I got lost on it, but what I was gonna say, the other thing other than kids doing it is I find it a big issue with like people my age, like mid 20s to late 30s, who are still like in the dating scene, and then as a man, you just lose your drive. You know what I mean? If you just, you know what I mean? Like you have like I feel like you have this like testosterone built up. You're gonna go out, you're gonna like find a girl, go hang out with her, go on a date and stuff like that. Well, then I feel like there's a group of men who are just like, well, I can just sit at home, masturbate. You know what I mean? And then just like
Right,
not even do anything, and then
right.
you just have like an
Well,
uptick of
and then,
dudes
well,
just playing video games.
Well, and the question then becomes, are they just recreational porn users who are really lazy, or
Yeah.
are they actual addicts? And that's one of the things. I do a lot of work with partners of porn addicts, because porn addicts are not fast to say, "Hey, I need help," but partners are very fast to say, "How do I help this guy?" And
Hmm.
a lot of partners will come to me and be like, I've asked him not to look at porn 2 or 3 times, and in the last 5 years, I've caught him looking twice. What do I do about his addiction? And it's like, well, number one, he is not addicted. The guy just
Yeah.
likes to look at
Hmm.
porn recreationally. That's not an addiction. Not following the wishes of your partner does not make whatever it is they're doing an addiction. But I also point out to partners that I sometimes think that if your partner is an addict, you're actually in a better situation, because I can speak as someone who was a porn addict for 24 years. It really doesn't have that much to do with what you're watching on the screen. It's it's satiating something else. I was also an alcoholic for just nearly as long, and these addictions helped me deal with other issues, and they were deep seated. It was early trauma, as it is with most addicts, but it doesn't really have to
Mm.
do with your addiction. Addiction is a symptom of a much larger problem. six,
Right.
7 years ago, when I finally got into rehab, both for alcoholism and for the porn, and I started doing the hard work with therapists and I started researching it, I started to figure out why I became this way. And that's the most important thing with addiction, to get over it, is to figure out how you developed it. And then you can develop other coping methods and healthier ways to deal with whatever that trauma or whatever that problem is that caused you to become that way. But when it comes to recreational users, why are they using? Well, because they just want to get off, because they just want to have that orgasm. And a lot of partners confuse somebody who is a recreational user with somebody who is an addict, because it both ends in an orgasm. And that's really just about
Hmm.
the extent of it. It ends in an orgasm. But when I was in therapy, when I was going through all this work, I found out, what these things were about. Alcohol was about me numbing myself to the world, and pornography was about me needing control. Because think about it, when you pull up a video clip, or a magazine, the person on that page never says no. That person on the page can be whoever you want them to be. You don't like what they look like, you flip the page, you click the button. You are in
Right.
complete control of this fantasy world. And it's not that it's a world of sex where you're a domineering macho guy, it's just that you're in control. And when I looked back over those 20 plus years that I was an addict, when I look at spikes, well, those spikes came when I was in less control of my world, when things were not going well, when I was in more financial problems than others, when I was having, issues with work or whatever. I went to pornography because that subconsciously gave me a sense of control. So it wasn't about just, seeing boobs and seeing sex, and it didn't
Yeah.
replace sex for me. Pornography never did that. Pornography replaces sex for the casual user. For the addict, it doesn't. And that's one of the things that I always have to drive home to partners, is that you
Hmm.
have nothing to do with this addiction. And it might even be better he's addicted for your ego and for where you are, because, I was an addict for 12 years before I met my wife. She had nothing to do with this. But for guys who just get tired of
Hmm.
being with the same woman, who need some kind of other outlet, well, to me, that says there's a problem in the relationship. That says maybe there's an issue you need to worry about here. Addiction is a completely separate issue entirely.
And so just I have to backtrack a little, but it'll lead into a new question. But um, I mean, I guess for the like for an OnlyFans or for something like that, the person creating the account and uploading the pictures, is there an addiction there as well?
And that's
Is that
that
just
that's
an attention
that's one of
thing?
the things that I have been getting a lot of traction with lately, and landing a lot of interviews and getting people reaching out to me, is because I have introduced the idea. I'm probably not the only one, but of, we understand pornography addiction from the user's side of things. We understand why somebody
Right.
like me gets addicted to pornography. But in January of this year, OnlyFans had roughly 300,000 users, or 300,000 producers. And that's up from 70,000 of, well,
Wow.
there were 70,000 users in July 2019. By January, there was 300,000 producers. By May, there
Wow.
by May there was 700,000 producers, and if you take the numbers that the CEO suggests, that they have 7 to 8,000 people joining as producers every day, right now there is somewhere between 1 million and 1.2 million people producing pornography on OnlyFans. If these numbers
Wow.
keep up, this means that worldwide, more than 1 million people, mostly young women, but there were men, there were older people, but over 1 million people decided to become pornography producers. Now, in the last book
Hmm.
I wrote was looking at pornography during the first couple months of the pandemic, because things really did
Hmm.
change. And OnlyFans is underrepresented in the book because we didn't have the numbers about it yet. But I talked to a lot of cam girls. I talked to some cam guys. I talked to a couple people who had started OnlyFans. And while the money is good, what I heard again and again was, this makes me feel pretty. This makes me feel like I'm part of a community. This makes me feel like I have friends. This makes me feel wanted. You know, people in real life just walk
Right.
by me, but on here, you know, they want to see me. They make me feel, you know, pretty. They make me feel wanted. And I talked to several therapists for the book as well, and they said that's what they hear from their clients who do this kind of stuff. So obviously the money is an incentive, and I'm sure, much like the stripper who's putting her way through med school, there are those who are out there doing it strictly for the money. But I think that there are a lot of these people who are getting other benefits, ego boosts, feeling better about themselves, you know, the self-image and this
Right.
stuff. It makes them feel better. I think that, similar to seeing that naked person on the screen for a user and getting a dopamine hit, if I tell that porn producer, my God, you're the most beautiful woman on earth, I'm more than willing to give you my hard-earned money to see you do something because you're so gorgeous. I think that's a
Yeah.
dopamine hit too. And the fact that, you know, we now are going to
Yeah.
have a million new people creating pornography in 2020, yeah, that's going to blow so many anti-pornography arguments that don't even work anyway out of the water, because we've never, you know, how many true porn stars are there at any time in existence? A couple thousand maybe. And now we're talking
Yeah.
about over a million people producing it. And I've got to think that there are going to be issues that we can't even fathom right now. And I'm not saying the 20 years from now, your
Right.
naked pictures show up somewhere and embarrasses you. Because frankly, if these numbers keep up, there are going to be millions and millions of people with naked pictures out there in 30 years. I don't think it's going to be as big a deal as people worry, because it's going to be this same society of younger people now that don't have the stigma, who in making hiring decisions 15, 20 years from now probably still won't have that stigma. So I don't know that having pictures out there is going to be a
Hmm.
huge deal. But the question is, how many of these people need to keep hearing this stuff? How many 40-year-old women, 45,
Mm.
50-year-old women or men are still going to be producing pornography because they need to hear how good they look? How many are going to be producing pornography because they spent the best years of their, you know, late teens, early 20s making porn online and didn't go get a real job and didn't develop any actual skills? How about PTSD? How about, you know, when your looks start to
Hmm.
go and people aren't saying that great stuff to you anymore, and you can't make the money on there that you once did? What does that do to your psyche? And I think that these are the questions we need to ask ourselves now that we weren't asking ourselves 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when the internet started. And we could all say, well, let's see what happens when kids have unending access to pornography. Well, now we've got, you know, not
Right.
kids, but we've got young adults who have unending access to making pornography. You can't tell me that you can't
Right.
tell me that some of these people are not going to end up addicted. And I think that pornography addiction 20, 20 years from now will not only include consumers, but it will include producers.
Jeez. Eric, you got anything else?
No, I do not. Um,
Okay.
do you want?
One listener wanted to ask, just to briefly throw this by you, like if you had the final say right now of if prostitution could be legal across the board or to keep it illegal in states, what would you say? Should it be legalized? Sex work, I guess.
I think that I don't think anything positive
Because
will ultimately come out of it. I don't think you're going to see sexual assault rates drop. I don't think you're going to see any kind of addiction rates drop. From a completely freedom, you know, point of
hmm
view, I can make an argument. I think it was George Carlin who said selling is legal and effing is legal. So why is selling effing not legal? Um, and there is some kind of sense to that. But I can't believe as a
yeah,
society it's going to be a positive thing. If you want to deregulate it, okay, look at some of the ways that they've done it in places like Amsterdam to make it, you know, a matter of public health. that there's a
Hmm.
union for sex workers in Amsterdam. I think it's called the Red String or the Red Light, something like that, and it's very regulated. And I think that
Yeah.
seeing in America how the deregulation of marijuana happens, from being completely illegal to being medicinal okay, to a lot of places, including where I am now
Yep.
in Maine, in the next few months, recreational is going to be legal. I think that we can probably learn a lot from decriminalizing marijuana and what happens over the next few years when it comes to things like decriminalizing drugs, decriminalizing prostitution. Ultimately, do I want my daughter to be a prostitute? Of course not. Do I want my son to go to a prostitute? Of
Right.
course not. Uh, if
Right.
so what are the positives? Is it going to reduce sex crimes? Is it going to reduce, is it going to do anything except make disease rise? Because we know not everybody is going to practice good practices. So ultimately, I think that it's probably not a good thing, but I think under the guise of freedom, under the guise of, and I don't want to take anybody's freedoms away, if we're
Yeah.
going to be a non hypocritical society, we probably ultimately need to move toward decriminalizing prostitution. We just need a ton of education to go along with it.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and when we talked about it on a few episodes ago, and I was kind of just thinking, as much as we can take, like, get people off of just back alley, stuff, because people are going to do it anyway. As much as we can get it like off the streets and into like an office complex that's like a massage therapist style, and send people there where it's safer and more regulated, that might be better because it's going to happen
Well,
anyway. Maybe we could just take it off the streets and into like a business where you're providing
Well,
401ks and health care and stuff like
exactly. And I
that.
talked to, I'm a journalist by trade. I spent almost 30 years doing that. And probably about 15 years ago, I was talking to a police officer in my town. And we were talking about how this one part of town used to be known for prostitutes, but there wasn't any anymore. And he said, well, the internet got that off the street. Craigslist, Backpage, these things
Hmm.
got prostitution off the street and brought it online. But now you had, the federal government cracking down on things like Backpage and Craigslist and those kinds of online listings.
Yep.
So it's moved back to the street, and that
Yep.
seems to be sketchier to me. That seems to be more dangerous to me. That seems to be fraught with, not just health issues, but for everybody involved. But there can be a lot more crime. It's not nearly as regulated not being online. And I think that we do need to look at the positives and the negatives. And like you said, people are going to do it. So
Yeah.
if that doesn't give it a green light necessarily, but this is not a violent crime. This is not a
Right.
crime where you have a victim that is unintended. This, of course, with trafficking and whatnot, that stuff can happen, and I worry that stuff may increase. But again, as a free society, we probably need to move towards a way to regulate this as safe as possible. Because if it's part of the culture anyway, why don't we at least try to clean it up? And you can say, no, no, it's too
Right.
evil, but we've done that. We tried to outlaw alcohol, didn't work. So now we have 1,000 regulations around it. We tried to outlaw marijuana, didn't work. So we're now working through the regulations and how we're going to be able to get it. I mean, I don't know about where you guys live, but where I live, there's now a dispensary on every friggin' corner. I have no
Right.
idea how these people, how these companies are surviving, because there just aren't enough people around here just to support them all. And once it becomes recreational, it's going to explode even more. But the thing is, the market is going to take care of that. There are X amount of users, there are X amount of people who will go get it, and there are X amount of people who will always stay away from it. And that's probably the same with
Hmm.
prostitution. I won't be somebody using it. I hope the people I love and know closely won't be using it, but that doesn't mean it necessarily should be completely outlawed, especially if we can have some kind of educational element behind it. And if we can actually prove through data after, say, a 5-year experimental process, did this do anything positive for society?
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. Well, thank you so much. Is there anywhere that we can mention that people can go or actions that can be taken, is there anywhere you want to send people?
Yeah, easiest place to go if you want to get. I've written a bunch of books about this. I have a lot of resources on my website. I write articles every week. Just check out my website, recoveringpornaddict.com. If you think you have an issue, if you don't want to go to therapy but want to talk to somebody who's been there, I have that. I have like I mentioned earlier, a service on there. Lots of different places you can go if you think you have an issue or if you think a loved one does. Or if you just want to know more about it, you can check out my website. You'll find something there that I'm sure is of use to you. So it is recoveringpornaddict.com.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. It was
Yeah,
great.
thank you. Thanks for having me, because there's still a lot of people out there who get scared to mention the P word, but we need to start mentioning it if we want to take it under control. So thank you guys very much for being willing to have this discussion with me.
Awesome. Thank you very much,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you very much.